The billionaire CEO's face turned red, not from anger, but from choking. For a split second, everyone thought he was about to collapse at the table. Glasses clinked, chairs scraped back. But before anyone could move, a calm voice cut through the panic. That's not what it means. The choking stopped. The room froze. Because the voice didn't belong to the translator or the lawyers or the investors. It came from a waitress, a young black woman holding a half-empty bottle of wine, who had just spoken flawless German. And with those 5 words, a $500 million empire began to crumble. Oh, the dining room wasn't just a restaurant. It was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers burned like fire above the tables, their golden light spilling over dark mahogany with polished, so smooth it reflected faces like mirrors. Waiters glided silently across the room, as if rehearsed, balancing trays that cost more than most people made in a month. And in the center of it all, at a long table set for a king, sat men who moved markets with their signatures. At the head was Bryant Maxwell. The papers called him America's finance prodigy. To the world, he was a man who could turn dust into gold. To the investors at that table, he was about to close a deal worth $500 million. But to the young woman standing at his side, pouring wine with steady hands, Maxwell was something else. A liar, a thief, a man about to be exposed. Her name was Leila Brooks, 24 years old, a waitress, invisible. At least that's how the powerful like to think of her. But tonight, invisibility had an advantage, because it let her see what others missed. The meeting had begun 2 hours earlier. Maxwell was his usual performance, calm, sharp, every smile rehearsed. He spoke of partnership and shared prosperity, weaving phrases that made men nod, even when they didn't understand. But his German investor across the table, Herr Dietrich, wasn't easily swayed. He wanted proof. He wanted contracts. And Maxwell had them. 2 sets, bound in leather, placed neatly on the table like holy scripture. The English version was clean, polite, full of balance and fairness. But the German version? That one held the knife. It slipped control of assets into Maxwell's hands with a clause so well buried it could pass unnoticed by anyone who trusted him, which is why he paid a translator to adjust a few words, a neat little swap, a harmless tweak on paper. And no one at that table was supposed to know the difference. No one but Leila. She hadn't planned to interfere. Not at first. Leila had grown up watching her mother clean offices at night, while her grandfather whispered German words into her ear like lullabies. He had fought for survival in a different war, and he wanted his granddaughter armed with more than just hope. Know their language. He used to say, if you know their words, you'll never be blind. By 16, Leila spoke German fluently. By 18, she'd added French and Italian. But college was expensive. Life was heavy. So instead of a lecture hall, she found herself here, balancing trays in one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining rooms. She learned quickly that in rooms like this, she was expected to be decoration. Polished, silent, unseen. But silence has a limit, and betrayal has a smell. When she glanced at the German contract that night, her stomach turned. The words weren't what Maxwell had claimed. They weren't what Dietrich believed. They were poison, and her chest tightened because she knew. If she said nothing, a man would lose everything. If she spoke, she could lose her job, maybe worse. Her hand trembled as she poured wine. She told herself, stay quiet, stay invisible. But then Maxwell smiled that perfect smile. And she saw her grandfather's face in her memory, his voice whispering. Silence in the face of lies is betrayal. And that's when she did it. That's not what it means. 5 words. Quiet, but sharp enough to cut the room in half. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Maxwell's hand froze midair, his glass of Bordeaux untouched. The investors turned their heads, confusion flashing across their faces. Leila's voice had been steady, but inside her chest thunder pounded. She set the bottle down carefully, forcing her hands not to shake. The German text, she said, her voice low but clear, doesn't match the English. It gives Maxwell Capital full control after a minor market shift. That's not what you told him. The translator's face drained of color. Dietrich's eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating. And Maxwell? His mask cracked. He turned his head slowly, like a predator scenting threat. "Excuse me?" His voice was cold steel. Leila met his gaze. For the first time in her life, she didn't look away. That's not what it means. The room shifted. Waiters stopped in their tracks. A fork clattered to a plate somewhere down the table. Dietrich leaned forward, his eyes flicking from Maxwell to the young woman who wasn't supposed to speak. "What exactly?" he asked, in accented English. "Did you read?" And in flawless German, smoother than Maxwell could ever fake, Leila translated the clause word for word. Every syllable landed heavy. Every phrase stripped Maxwell bare. Gasps rippled around the table. The translator swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. Maxwell's jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck showed. And Leila, the invisible waitress, realized she had just declared war on a billionaire. Maxwell laughed. It wasn't the laugh of a man amused. It was the laugh of someone cornered, scrambling to regain control. "Gentlemen," he said, spreading his hands as though calming children, "this is nonsense. A waitress misreading technical language? Please." But the confidence in his tone didn't land. Not this time. Because the investor wasn't looking at him anymore. He was looking at her. "Leila," and when she repeated the clause again, her German clear and precise, the silence that followed was heavy enough to break the deal in half. The translator cracked first. Under pressure, his voice shaking, he admitted it. The bribe, the edited text, the deception. Maxwell's empire began crumbling right there, in front of a half-empty bottle of wine and a waitress who refused to stay invisible. But Maxwell wasn't a man who surrendered. Not easily. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he hissed, his voice low, meant only for her. "Do you know what happens to people who cross me?" Leila's hands trembled. Fear coiled in her chest. She was just a server in a starched white uniform. She had rent due, a sick mother at home, dreams of finishing school someday. But she also had something Maxwell had lost a long time ago. Integrity. "Yes," she whispered back. "I know exactly who you are. And now, so does everyone else." The rest unraveled fast. Dietrich pushed back his chair and stood, his face set like stone. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The deal is over. The room erupted. Phones out, investors whispering, assistants rushing in. Maxwell tried to recover, spinning words like he always had. But the more he spoke, the more hollow he sounded. By dawn, the headlines were everywhere. Black waitress exposes $500 million CEO scam. Fraud in translation. That's not what it means. Stock prices plummeted. Board members panicked. Within a week, Maxwell was forced out of his own empire. The same investors who once cheered his brilliance now avoid his name like poison. His fall was faster than anyone imagined, and it had started with a whisper. For Leila, everything changed. At first, she feared the worst, being blacklisted, humiliated, discarded. But something unexpected happened. Her courage spread. People admired her honesty. Professors reached out, offering scholarships. Law firms and translation companies sent her letters. The girl no one noticed suddenly had a future wide enough to hold her dreams. She finished school. She built a career. She carved her name in places Maxwell would never reach again. And though she never sought fame, her story became a legend whispered in corporate hallways. Be careful, because the quietest voice in the room might be the one that destroys you. Maxwell tried to rebuild. Men like him always do, but shadows cling to fraud. His name was a curse, his face a reminder of arrogance undone. Meanwhile, Leila lived her grandfather's words. She turned silence into strength. She carried truth like a weapon. Because sometimes the world doesn't change with power. It doesn't change with money. Sometimes it changes with 5 quiet words spoken at the right time. That's not what it means. And in that moment, $500 million vanished, but truth won.